two ways that the Chinese script can give information about pronunciation, right? One is the actual internal structure of characters, and then the other one is Tongjia, which is kind of when the same word can be written with more than one character. So especially because last time I rushed a little bit at the end, I think it is good to refresh our memory. So we start with xiéshēng, yeah, and I also think xiéshēng and tōngjiǎ go nicely together. So yeah, so a character typically has a semantic component and a phonetic component, and so here is a series built on this word get, which I think means skin. Okay, so now we look at the series and we say this is in Middle Chinese, and we have to start from Middle Chinese because it's the first place we have systematic recording of the pronunciation, right? So we look at the Middle Chinese and we're asking ourselves, remember, kind of what is it that two morphemes have to have in common phonologically in order for our ancestors to have been willing to write one morpheme with a character, like write one morpheme using as its phonetic the character that typically writes another word. That's the question. So we start empirically by just saying, well, with Middle Chinese, which is the only firm starting point we have, what do characters have in common in their pronunciation that are written with the same phonetic? So we look at this series and we say, well, in this series we have two finals and we have three initials, and the three initials have the same place of articulation but different manners of articulation. So then we got to this xiéshēng hypothesis. So according to Duan Yucai, characters that have the same phonetic component write words that would have rhymed in the language of the Book of Odes. And here I mean rhyme, just in terms of poetry, right? And I'll just, since I mentioned it last time at the end, just say this is not a claim that can be verified, right? Because the xiéshēng has only certain rhyme words in it, so it's more like a research program than a hypothesis, right? Okay, and then and then Li Fenghui added the stipulation to the xiéshēng hypothesis that two morphemes written with characters in the same xiéshēng series should have homoorganic initials. Yeah. Okay. So xiéshēng series that mix Middle Chinese pronunciations that have non-homoorganic initials provide an opportunity to explain divergent pronunciations as phonologically conditioned. This is what I was saying, at the very end last time, that once we formulated this sort of, well, let's call it xiéshēng dogma, then if we see anything that violates it, we try to force that thing back into conformity with the xiéshēng hypothesis. And this is, I would say, one of the major tools of reconstructing Old Chinese. And actually, I don't think we'll get to it very much today, maybe right at the end, but otherwise tomorrow, in terms of showing you how that program is concretely implemented. Okay, so just to sort of hammer the point home. So xiéshēng evidence generally doesn't provide information about tones, although there are some series actually that are consistent in tone. But it tells you the place of articulation in Old Chinese of the initial, and there should be the same main vowel and final consonant of all morphemes written with the same series in general. Okay, and then I go back to this because I skipped it over very quickly last time. So we distinguish these different periods or different styles of script. So oracle bones, and then bronze, and then the Warring States script, so-called ancient script, and then the seal script. And the seal script is particularly important because, what does it even mean, the seal script? I would actually say, like we say Middle Chinese is whatever is in the Qieyun. I would say seal script is whatever is in the xiéshēng. Yeah. So Mr. Shushan wrote this book, the xiéshēng, where he gave seal script versions of the script, and then would analyze each character in terms of what is its phonetic, what is its semantic, or sometimes other kinds of explanations, and sometimes sound glosses as well. And I would say all paleography and the use of xiéshēng series for phonology takes as its point of departure Shushan. Now, that's not to say, like, we have many more primary sources available to us than he did. So he got a lot of things wrong. And actually, I would love it one day if someone just wrote a little book called All of the Things That Shushan Got Wrong. Yeah. Because they're not conveniently, at least in my experience, collected anywhere. But I would say, you know, yeah, so that's, I just felt like I needed to mention the xiéshēng because we're talking about xiéshēng series. Now, actually, where can you find, you know, xiéshēng series? Well, Carlgren has his collection in Throughout Presenza, and then the most convenient collection more recently is in Schussler's 2009 book. And I've actually put online a wiki book that lists kind of Carlgren's xiéshēng series, Schussler's xiéshēng series, and then my attempt at kind of creating a list that Baxter and Cigar would endorse. They've never themselves kind of you know, published an analysis of Chinese characters into xiéshēng series, but you can find in their work they say, oh, this one should be split, these two should be merged, and I've tried to sort of make a go at that in this wiki book, which you should be able to find quite easily online, but if you need some help, you let me know. Anyhow, we sort of covered that, and now I'm going to actually just skip on to changes in character usage. So now I'm approaching the Tongjia issue, right? So here is a poem in the Book of Odes, yeah, and we are going to look at the first character. Here is probably too small for you to read, but here you can read it. But the Mao version and the Anhui version have different characters for this first syllable, which is quan quan. Yeah. So it, you know, this is, I don't know, this is spelling variation, and we can I want to be very precise. Yeah, the poem. So let's say it like this: the Tsiukyu bird made some noise in the old days. Yeah, and maybe it was something like quan quan, and presumably, yeah, the Mao version of the Shijing and the Anhui version of the Shijing are trying to capture that same sound, but they do it with two different characters. And so let's say we can presume that those two characters are indicating the same sound. Now, you know, you don't want to take this too far because, like, if, you know, just because two characters are indicating the same sound at one time and place, or even two different times and places, like wherever Anhui version was written and wherever Mao version was written, that doesn't, you know, that's not good for all time, right? It might be that in a certain time and place, two morphemes became homophonous, but then in other times and places, they're not homophonous. So we have to use these spelling variations with care. Actually, the same is also true of the xiéshēng series, right? That some characters are coined earlier than others. Also needs to be exercised with care. But one thing I would say, sort of from a methodological perspective, is it's always good to start with the simple hypothesis and then to refine it, right? So the simple hypothesis would be that all Chinese characters were coined at the same moment, yeah? And it's manifestly not the case, we know that. But if you worry too much about these problems, then you'll never make any progress. You'll say, well, yes, okay, those two characters have the same phonetic, but who knows when and where they were used, right? So I think it's better to start with the simple assumption than to refine it. And believing a false assumption is perfectly useful because you find out concretely how it gets modified and when it's wrong. But anyhow, back to this quan. So yeah, so we have here different characters that write the same morpheme, and both of these characters write this sound that the bird makes. Yeah. So now we're going to develop a kind of notation for this, and this comes from Jinqi. So I thank her for for this. So because the trouble is, it's not dissimilar to the sort of rank versus division thing where we have one term in Chinese deng, and then we need to tease apart different actual meanings. So when I use a Chinese character, am I talking about that character or that word or that morpheme or that pronunciation? It's quite hard to distinguish these things, especially because everyone always writes about these things in Chinese. So let's say if we put it in curly brackets, we mean the word, no matter how it's spelled, even if we put a character in it, then I guess we're meaning the word typically written with that character, today, or the morpheme that's written in sort of kaishu script, Okay, so that's there it is, and it's sound and it's meaning, yeah. And then if we put it in square brackets, we mean this graphic form in specific textual materials as it is written. And now it might be we put in an actual picture of the original character, or maybe a sort of strict paleographic transcription, so a leading, yeah, we might put that in there. And then this one, just A, we're saying it's the character, its graphic form, sound, and meaning, which is to say kind of just what we mean when we use a character typically, right? We mean that character for that word with that sound and that meaning, yeah. And then we have these to basically turn pieces of that off, right? Where here we're interested in the sound and meaning regardless of how it's written. And here we're interested in the writing regardless of how it sounds or what it means. So I commend this practice to you, unless you can think of something that's even more, elegant or explicit, as a way to, say like, I always think, actually, I'll get to this maybe later, maybe tomorrow. But the closest thing to Tongjia, I think, in the West is spelling variation, right? Where let's take an example like KN in English used to be pronounced, right? So you would say kniffe instead of knife, and knicht instead of night, like a knight in Weimar. After that sound change, it's possible for someone to make spelling mistakes. So maybe they'll write night like, oh, isn't it a beautiful night tonight, with a K, yeah? So those, so the same things come up, right? KNIGHT, what does it, is it referring to which morpheme? How is it pronounced in different times and places? So I think that sort of spelling variation is, can give you phonological information, and quite analogously to how, let's call it spelling variation in Chinese can give you phonetic information, and that's both in terms of when things are pronounced the same and when they're pronounced differently. One of Baxter and Segar's main arguments for, or no, not a main argument for, but best pieces of evidence for separating uvulars and velars is that some characters never have Tongjia connections. So it's like as if the KNs and the Ns are always kept strictly apart. That's a kind of prima facie evidence that the K was still being pronounced, right? Okay, anyhow. So now let's just see this kind of notation in practice. So we have the curly brackets, that means the word, yeah. So like the word, however it's written. Whereas here, there are two different spellings. So we have them in the square brackets. And then, this character sort of means paradigmatically, well, are they the same actually? Yeah. But so here we're talking about two different morphemes. Yeah. So the sound, the meaning, and the spelling. Okay. And then let's just say we can use this term conventional form, which means how the word is written in the received documents is how it could be understood, as opposed to excavated, right? Because the received documents, which means non-excavated, yeah, a book you just pull out of the library. You say, oh, I want to read the Zhuangzi, and you take it off the shelf in the library. That's what we mean by received, yeah. That will have been standardized to some extent in spelling. And so that's the spelling that, that we mean as the conventional form, or just like what comes out of your computer when you type, yeah. Okay, so here we have some spelling variation in the last month of spring, yeah. Okay, now let's look at this case. So here we have a morpheme that means late, so mu, and it can be written and these are spellings, yeah. And then we can say, okay, this is this morpheme spelled this way, and then this is this morpheme spelled this way, and this is this morpheme spelled this way. So, there have been times and places where people wrote late using the same character as we usually use not for. So I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just sort of showing how you can use this, these notational conventions when talking about Tongjia, right? Yeah, I mean the point here is that there's a tendency, I would say, and I don't know kind of who I'm picking on here, but there's a tendency to sort of approach the excavated documents as if they're full of spelling mistakes. You say, oh, when they wrote this, they meant to write this, and when they wrote this, they meant to write it. And that's extremely anachronistic, right? So when we say the conventional spelling, by default, that means vis-a-vis our own practice. But it's important to keep in mind that in different times and places, what was conventional also was different. And to some extent, it's inevitable that we write. So, for instance, Chu script in Kaishu, it makes it much easier for us. But we just need to be sort of vigilant in being aware of the kind of anachronism and the sort of epistemological violence that's done in that case. And actually, I would say that Michela, who I think is here, yeah, he gave a great paper in Munich recently where he actually looked at like if you conventionalize orthography, you can obliterate like philological, and that means even phonological information that's in the original, where maybe a slight variation in the writing of a character in different contexts is giving you phonological information. And so you can ask him about that, or actually his talk will, maybe even tomorrow, but maybe not. Every Thursday, one of the talks gets released on my YouTube channel, so you can keep your eyes peeled for that. Anyhow, okay, so Tongjia is let's say, and I mean Tongjia, like I want to be very careful about this. It's like the book, a book is just a book. It doesn't know that it has Tongjia in it. Yeah. So Tongjia is a sort of like let's say there's a subjective and an objective dimension to Tongjia, but I would say Tongjia is an act of morphological analysis, right? When I say, oh, now it's not up there anymore, but when I say this character has this meaning, right? I'm identifying a morpheme. I'm analyzing the text as composed of morphemes. So Tongjia is an active morphological analysis where a spelling variation is caused by differences in the habits of character usage. So using a particular character to render a particular word, right? And then kind of Tongjia is either the fact that, you know, in this text, this writing is used to write this morpheme, or you can understand it as my analysis that in this text, this writing is used to write some particular morpheme. Yeah. And I'm sort of belaboring this because I feel like, especially kind of when speaking Chinese, people just, oh, Tongjia, you know, and it's not, actually, there's a lot of machinery in the identification of characters as Tongjia that should be, to some extent, you know, kept track of or made explicit. Right. So and then Tongjia or Podu is a kind of bridges the relationship between character usage in excavated text and in received text to point out the particular morphemes that stand behind graphic forms. Yeah. So it kind of can be thought of as transcribing the characters in ancient textual materials into conventionalized forms. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be personally, I think it would be better if we just didn't use Chinese characters to analyze excavated documents, and instead did something like they do for Akkadian and Sumerian, where you actually transcribe, you sort of transliterate what's there in a way that makes your analysis of it explicit. And I've proposed a system for doing that in, gosh, a long time ago, maybe 2009 or something like that, in the Li Fenghui, Bulletin of Li Fenghui Society. And I think that, or let's say all my friends say that this particular paper is like, if you want to convince people you've lost your mind, then you show them that I wrote this, which is say it's not going to become popular because there are just too many Chinese people who know Chinese, whereas there are no Akkadians around anymore who will insist on writing still in some kind of cuneiform. Right? But anyhow, on we go. So this is, I mean, we sort of have covered this ground, but just to sort of hammer it home, right? So in terms of how we use this notation, we can say the morpheme A is written as B, or we can say the symbol B records the morpheme A, and that's how these curly brackets and square brackets can be useful. And like I said, this is Jinqi's suggestion, but I think it works very nicely. So you can use it if you don't see any reason not to. Yeah. Okay. And now, for those who have lovely sort of sharp eyesight, I invite you. You can take a screenshot or something and do it in the break. Here is the Anhui version. Here is the Mao version. So I've done the first one for you. You say this is written as this, right? So you can do some of the other ones in this stanza and email them to me, for example. Yeah. Okay. And then I'll just point out that this equals means repeated character. Yeah. Okay. So I give you 5 seconds to take your screenshot. Yeah. Or I can actually share the slides also afterwards, or you can just look at the Anhui manuscript. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move on now. All right, so yeah, and then yeah, I'll just say that the I don't know, I guess this is trying to say the rebus principle. There's a shared kind of principle behind xiéshēng and Tongjia, which is rebus, which is like using this is what Boltz talk about, is turning off the semantics, if you like. Yeah, so you can use a character for its pronunciation, and then you might do that by using the whole character, in which case it's Tongjia, or you might do it by using the character for its pronunciation and adding something to it to indicate the semantics, in which case you're making a new character. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just say we've kind of done that. And then here is another, yeah, so we have two tests now. No, three, okay, so the first one is give the Middle Chinese for these characters.
I think I'll send the slides around afterwards, so you don't need to do it now, yeah.
And then the second one is, this one we can do together. You tell me what the tone is, and let's just start with, all the way in the back. Who is the most in the most back? What's the tone of this character?
The first one?
Yeah. Well, just tell me how you know what the tone is.
Yes.
The X. Yeah, okay. So we can say it's the X tone. Yeah. It's called well, let's see, next person can't say it. What is
What the next one is, or what the next one?
what does the X mean?
I think first one. Laryngalization.
No, it's it just means it's a certain tone.
No, but like the H is from historical S, right?
Yeah, but that's not the question I asked. I'm looking for something like
Sorry, yeah, never
rising tone. Yeah. Or
It's a name like that.
yeah. Okay.
mind. Wait, I think it's rising tone.
Yeah, it is rising tone.
Thanks.
Well done.
I knew that.
So I was right to start at the back. Yeah. Okay. All right, who's next? What's this one?
Entering.
No, don't. We're starting at the back.
Okay.
Josiah, yeah.
I have
So
to redeem myself. Yeah.
Steve, who's after you? Yeah, okay. I mean, I actually can't see, I see very poorly, so you're all just a haze back there. Okay, tell me, let's start with, where are we indicating the tone here? Well, how is this one different than this one? Is there a capital X? Yeah, so now I'm looking at this one. Does this one have an X? No. So you can at least tell me what tone it isn't. Is it the rising tone?
Yeah.
No, it's not the rising tone, because the rising tone has an X. Yeah, okay, we can go to the next person. Next person. Pardon? It's a level tone. Yeah, okay. Next person, what's this one?
It has the stop consonant at the end, so
Yeah.
I think that's the rule.
Yes, right, yeah, okay. And then who's next after you?
Oh, it's me, but I have no idea.
Well, you can look at it and tell me, how do we know how is the tone being indicated? I'll give you a hint. When we were looking at this one, how was the tone being indicated?
It's always with the vowel sound. I'm not sure.
She just came in. So
Oh, you just came in?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was like, what? Were you not here 2 minutes ago? Okay. Then we'll let you skip to the next person. So we're still on this one. Next person, please.
I mean, the H might be high.
It's H usually means high, but and I mean, basically you identified that it's the H, so yes, but
Maybe it's parting tone.
yeah, that's correct. Parting tone, yeah. I actually always get them mixed up myself because it's just totally, what does it mean, departing tone? Yeah. All right, and now we have actually done all four.
tones, so I'll, leave the remaining ones as an exercise for you, yeah, okay. And now, here's one that will be even more fun. So, so we start from where we left off, and you go to the next person, and the next person tell me, what division is this one? 2. How do you know? Yeah, it's because AE. Yeah, okay. Now, next person.
I recall the Y there isn't getting the right. I think that's 3, right?
3, yeah, right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, yeah, okay. Next person.
No
I
idea.
think we moved 1 row up, maybe, right?
No, no idea.
No idea. Well, let's say there are only 4 options. So can you tell me what it's not? So we just heard that the third one has a Y in it. Does this one have a Y in it?
So it's not 2 and 3.
It's not 2 or 3. So now you have a 50% chance if you get it.
1.
No, it's 4. And next person, how do we know it's 4?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. The answer is it has the vowel E in it. Yeah. Okay. Now next person.
No, actually, we should say it starts with the vowel E.
Yes, it starts with the vowel.
AE is also with vowel E.
Okay, yeah, it has the letter E in it, and it has no J's or Y's before the E.
Nor A.
And it's not in the combinations AE or EA. Yeah. So it has let's call it a straightforward E in it. Okay, and then next person, this one.
First division,
Yeah, why?
because it's not the other 3.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
I'm guessing it has something to do with the A.
yeah, there's no Y's or J's anywhere to be seen. There's no AE or EA, and there's no E, like there's no straightforward E, yes. So, and then this last one, next person. 3, yeah. Why is it 3?
J.
Because of the J, yeah. Yeah, so nice work. Okay, and then I check what time it is and maybe zoom on to the next one. Yeah. Do I just click on this one? Yeah. And then, oh, sure. Can you help me make the? Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so I mean, I mentioned some of this before, but let's say we want to contrast, yeah, clarify the difference between transcription and reconstruction. So transcription is something like Baxter's Middle Chinese, where he's trying to write in one writing system the information contained in another writing system. Yeah. So alphabetically transcribe all of the I don't know, facts about the synchronic phonology in rhyme books and rhyme tables. And then reconstruction is where we're actually, inventing, I mean, sort of, yeah, I think it's not wrong to say we're positing a formerly existing form based on available evidence. And that includes a story about how that reconstructed form becomes the later forms, right? Okay. So now we'll talk about Old Chinese. And as I have mentioned before, Old Chinese is broadly speaking some form of Chinese spoken between 1100 BC and 200 BC. And there would have been, lots of different kinds of Chinese in this time and space, but we have to start somewhere. So kind of make homogeneous Old Chinese, and then can investigate more systematically how it was different in different times and places. So research on Old Chinese phonology has reached a relatively mature stage. So there are still some kind of quite entrenched disagreements, but the disagreements are smaller than they look to an outsider, because people, you know, for instance, take something like Division 2, you might have two different people write it differently. So then to an outsider, it looks like their reconstructions are very different, but actually it's just a question of like how they've chosen to symbolize something, whereas they may not disagree very much, even about the phonetic value of it, but certainly not about the categorical analysis. So I would actually say that it looks like there's enormous disagreement among different people working on Old Chinese historical phonology, but what you actually have is extremely strongly felt disagreement on relatively small issues, yeah. At least when we're talking about things other than consonant clusters. I think with consonant clusters, there's some genuine disagreement. Yeah. And then if we want to talk about two popular reconstructions, especially in the Anglophone world, we can distinguish OCM, which is Schussler's minimal Old Chinese, and then Baxter and Cigars, which work on OCBS. Yeah. So so partly there's a philosophical disagreement here, or difference of approach. So Schussler is trying to be minimal. So he's trying to make something that no one will disagree with. Say, okay, here's what we can really know is true about Old Chinese, and it should be verifiable only with Chinese evidence and without much etymological speculation. I will say that actually there are some points in his Old Chinese reconstruction, like having KH final, I think, and having initial ya, that actually are quite idiosyncratic to him and quite controversial. So I do think that, like, inevitably, it's his reconstruction, so it reflects his ideas, but he's trying to make it uncontroversial, right? Whereas Baxter and Cigar are really going for sort of the oldest possible form of Old Chinese imaginable, using all the possible evidence that they could get their hands on, and being relatively imaginative, let's say, with etymological hypotheses. So that's the difference between the two of them, yeah. And I would say that generally speaking, given this difference in approach, you can mechanically convert Old Chinese of Baxter and Cigar into Schussler's, but you can't do the other way, yeah? So actually, one reason that I use Baxter and Cigar system is precisely because of that, yeah, which is say, like, maybe they are wrong about everything, right? It doesn't matter because if you use their system, you're not losing any information, yeah. But if you use Schussler's, and it turns out that Baxter and Cigar are right about anything, then you're missing out, yeah. So basically, I feel like, okay, maybe Baxter and Cigar system is a little bit unwieldy sometimes, but it's better to have more than less, right? And if you disagree with any component of their system, you can just ignore it, yeah. Anyhow, that's about them. Oh, and then, but I will also say that because also of this philosophical difference, and I think both Schussler and Baxter and Cigar would object to what I'm about to say. Sorry about that, but I think more or less you can take OCM to be kind of late Old Chinese and OCBS to be sort of early Old Chinese, because that conservatism on Schussler's part has the effect of erring on things that are more recent, yeah. And I think for certain purposes you may find it like if you're really worried about like the Han Dynasty or something, maybe you should use OCM for your Old Chinese. And if you're really worried about Sino-Tibetan reconstruction, probably better to go with OCBS. So here's just one example of this kind of difference in approach, philosophy, case. So we have this nay inside. So So we know the O is actually like an right? And then the H is the xiéshēng. So OCM reconstructs moots, yeah, because I don't know. Let's say I don't have enough I haven't given enough background to say where the T is coming from, let's say in general OJH will come from TS, yeah. But then the Baxter cigar have oops, yeah, and then I'll just point out that this little hat means type A syllable, which I haven't defined yet, but means not division 3, yeah. And here they use this little pharyngalization system, so it's a symbol. So like whether you use the little hat or the pharyngalization, that's no difference, right? That's a totally conventional arbitrary symbolization. Whereas the T versus the P, that's a real difference in claim, yeah? And then the evidence that Baxter and Cigar would point to for the P is that here you have a character in the same xiéshēng series that in Middle Chinese had a P. So putting the P in, explains that relationship, whereas Trissler just feels like, look, I'm not so interested in these kind of etymological speculations. So it's more conservative to do the T. And actually, this is also a good example of, I think Baxter and Cigar and even Trissler maybe would say PS changes to TS quite early. So so it's a nice example of the more speculative, freewheeling approach of Baxter and Cigar also gets you older than the more conservative approach of Trissler. Okay. So now let's look at a xiéshēng series. So this is a xiéshēng series. And you'll notice that we have sort of dentals and dentally stuff for the first 3, yeah? So tua, zua, xiwa, yeah? And then we get ya and ha for the rest, right? So this is the kind of thing I was saying, like if we believe the xiéshēng hypothesis, we ought to be able to come up with some way of making all these homo-organic in Old Chinese. That's not easy to do. So Baxter and Cigar will kind of rise to the challenge and say, let's do it. Let's come up with some crazy idea to explain this relationship. Whereas Schussler, I think, is content to say like, oh well, the phonetic here is this character for bird, and maybe there were two words for bird, and so they're actually different xiéshēng series, right? So it's a kind of there's also a difference here of sort of lumpers and splitters, where generally Baxter and Cigar are lumpers, and Schussler and certainly Karlgren are splitters. Okay, so here's just looking at it. We have, it seems like we have basically 2 sort of xiéshēng series here in terms of what syllable type they're encoding. Yeah. And we don't have, any way, in a sense, any way to know who's right. Yeah, it's just a balance of who has the more elegant story to tell, and there are questions of taste that come into this. Yeah. So how do we reconstruct Old Chinese when we have to do it so indirectly? Well, one is we start with Middle Chinese, yeah, because Old Chinese should more or less be what turns into Middle Chinese, almost by definition, right? And then we have rhymes in early poetry, especially the shijing. And then we have Tongjia, this is what I was talking about before, and xiéshēng series. And some explicit comments in books. You have people who say like, something like the Fangyan, but also commentaries from earlier. You also say, oh, over in the West, they say it like this. And now that's very hard to use because those are also Chinese characters, yeah. But that is an important source as well. So, and then we can also look at modern Chinese dialects.
early Chinese loanwords into other languages, and that is particularly where Baxter and Cigar have done more than other people. And then you can take hints from Tibeto-Burman, and I think that, let's say what Baxter and Cigar would say and what I would say is, if you are ever facing a choice, like, should I do it like this or should I do it like this? It's arbitrary from a Chinese perspective. You might as well go with whatever makes the Tibeto-Burman comparisons look better. Or actually, I would say if you're writing an article, one thing that can be very stylish is you argue entirely from Chinese internal evidence. And then at the end, you point out, oh, look, and this makes the comparisons to Tibeto-Burman look better. Yeah. Okay. So, you'll remember we started with these initials. Oh, right. There was a very nice discussion online yesterday, particularly about the influence of Buddhism on this analysis of the initials. And so I will just say that this is something that there's no smoking gun. There's no sort of document that really says, here is Buddhism and it's influencing Chinese historical phenomena. Yeah? But there's some quite good circumstantial evidence that indeed, like the first mention we have of this list of initials is in a fragment from Dunhuang that is by this monk whose name is confusingly Shōen. Yeah? So, yeah, he's a Buddhist monk. So, yeah, let's say the Fanche and the explicit enumeration of initials, and indeed the analysis of tones, all happen after Buddhism was introduced to China. So let's say there's good circumstantial evidence that it was some kind of Indic influence, but we're talking about a long time ago, so there's no really kind of totally unambiguous solid evidence. And then also some people have argued that there's kind of evidence of Fanche-like analyses, even in the coining of new characters, actually. So, anyhow, that was something that was discussed yesterday, so I just thought I would touch on it. And like everything that I can tell you about Chinese historical phonology, there is like a footnote in my 2019 book where I mentioned the secondary literature on that. Anyhow, here are the initials. And then I just want to, I'm not systematically going to internally reconstruct Middle Chinese to get you Old Chinese now. I just want to give you a flavor of each of these kind of sources of evidence. So here's one. We look at the relationship between divisions and the sort of manner of articulation in Middle Chinese. And you see that there are some complementary distributions here, right? So you could, for instance, you could merge division 1 and 2, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can't merge 1 and 4, no. And you can't merge 3 with anything, yeah. We'll come back to this, but you will see that there are these interesting complementary distributions. Also, like division 2 doesn't occur with L, so this is possibilities for internal reconstruction, right? Okay, and then so that was, now I'm going back to the xiéshēng series, but now the context is as a source for reconstructing Old Chinese. So, like I said, we have homo-organic initials, and we should have the same rhymes, yeah? So when we see a series that violates that, then we try to come up with a solution that brings it into conformity. So let's look at these characters, for instance. Yeah, so just those of you who know these characters say, oh, look, they have, they are what they are. Yeah, okay. Now here they are with their Middle Chinese. So you can see that
they don't have homo-organic initials, yeah? So we have na, we have ta, and we have ha, and these are not homo-organic. So we should come up with a theory that makes them homo-organic, right? And here is an example of one such theory. The h's that we're seeing come from sna in a Western dialect, and the t's we're seeing come from a sna in an Eastern dialect. And this is well documented in ancient texts. So we have the word for heaven, which in the East is ten, right, which is where we get tian from, and in the West is hen, which is why you can write, for instance, the word for India is tianzhu or something like that, right? So that's because it's Hindu, yeah. Yeah, it says that right here, Hinduka. So Hintruk would be all Chinese, not, you know, not what it was, but Hindu, yeah, that is Hindu, yeah. So that gives us Tianzhu. So anyhow, that's some, you know, we've come up with a hypothesis wanting to make a xiéshēng series homo-organic, and then we find that actually there is some good evidence for it. Josiah, you have a question?
The name Hinduka looks Iranian.
Yeah, well,
Is it borrowed from Sogdian or something?
well, I mean, we like, you know, like where's the Silk Road? Yeah, of course it's Iranian, yeah.
Well, sure, but I mean, it could be from, like, I mean, possibly from India, right?
No,
In this case, it's not.
yeah, I mean, yeah, well, I mean, the details of this I aren't for me to say, but they knew about the, yeah.
And we also have synchronic, like modern evidence for the he, or two more evidences. First is the existence of the character xian, which is the god radical plus.
Yeah, that's actually
it's mentioned
right here, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the modern bi evidence.
So I mean, you can maybe tell me about the bi evidence later, not right now, yeah. But okay, so here's from the xiéshēng. The sky in these areas is pronounced with the belly of the tongue. The sky is brilliant, yeah. In Qing and Hu, it is pronounced with the tip of the tongue. So here's an explicit discussion in the xiéshēng of this kind of isogloss, right? And then here is this is what you were talking about. So it's the Zoroastrians, yeah. The Zoroastrians worship the sky. Yeah? So the first word is pronounced and. The Kaohsiung says the Iranians call heaven, they call deities heaven. Yeah, today, within the past, that is, you know, in this area, they call it Shen. Yeah, okay, so quite explicit, you know, evidence. Yeah. Okay. So now I talked about the xiéshēng series. Now Tongjia, and then here's what I said. There's, you know, we can look at just in English these spelling variations where like came. You know, if you actually pronounce it kame or something, then you wouldn't be able to spell it C-E-M-E, yeah? And take, if you actually said take, then you wouldn't be able to spell it T-E-K-E. So these kind of spelling variations can tell you about sound change. And, you know, an erstwhile ah has changed into or something, yeah. And then here is, and now this all gets a little bit, you know, technical, but evidence of how Tongjia can help us in historical linguistic or in phonological reconstruction. So we have this word abandon, which is, yeah, pure, yeah, or and here it's written with a P final, and here it's written with a T final. So probably then we think, like I was actually, like the earlier, as I was mentioning, probably originally a PS, then, and here, they said, oh, P is kind of close enough to PS, yeah. And then the PS changes into a T, and then they said, oh, well, TS, I can write as T, yeah. Yeah, and this is from an article that Jinqi has coming out soon, right? Is it? Yeah, it's not out yet, I think. No. Okay, and then here's another one, and this is nice because it really helps kind of somewhat exotic looking reconstruction of Baxter and Cigar. So Baxter and Cigar reconstruct Snarak, yeah. So here we have this frighten or shock, and in this text it's written with Srik, and in this text it's written with Ying. So it's quite good evidence, you know, that there was a velar nasal in there at some point. So that's how you can use Tongjia, and I think that's, you know, I think it was Koblin who, in his review of Baxter's 1992 book, he said, this is about as much juice as anyone is ever going to squeeze out of the xiéshēng. Yeah. And I think that, you know, I think that's not quite true. I think we managed in the subsequent decades to squeeze a little bit more juice out of the xiéshēng even. But I think that, you know, Baxter and Cigar then moved really into, for instance, looking at loanwords. But I actually think Tongjia and the sort of philology of excavated text still has huge potential for clarifying things in historical phonology. Yeah. Okay, so then, you know, now we've sort of finally, so you can understand, and I'm not sure that this is very clear, right? I was putting the pieces in place in the last few days to say, okay, what is Middle Chinese? What is Tongjia? What is xiéshēng? And now we can, you know, say, oh, when we reconstruct Old Chinese, we use Middle Chinese, Tongjia, xiéshēng, yeah. And so, yeah, to conclude, then Old Chinese is, you know, Chinese from this long period, and it has many variants, and we use to reconstruct it Middle Chinese and rhymes from poetry, and xiéshēng and Tongjia, and explicit, you know, mentions of pronunciation in texts. And now I've given you a kind of taste of each of those, and then I think I've also, well, no, not quite run out of time, but oh, and then, you know, the modern languages, early loans, and Tibeto-Burman. And I think that rather than jumping into the next half of this presentation, I should probably keep it for tomorrow, and then we will actually, you know, do some reconstructing using these sources of evidence. Yeah. So I'll stop there, even though it's a little bit